Subscribe to the MTL World at Middle World 1 YouTube channel. Swallowed Star 2, Land of Origin. Volume 11, The Hunyuan Blade Dao. Chapter 399 Negotiations. 14th of Volume 11. Translator, Shadow Knight AK. Editor, Shadow Knight AK. Yuan arrived at the occupied territory and looked at the surrounding scene, his expression turned cold. Throughout his long life, he had dedicated himself to the practitioners' faction. Among the lords, Yuan had contributed the most in terms of nurturing the younger generation of practitioners. Now, seeing over 100 world clusters being plundered and the origin essences of many origin worlds being devoured, how could he remain unbothered? The I-Speak faction and the innate Hunyuan lifeform faction are essentially the same. Both consist of innate Hunyuan beings who plunder resources, many of whom relish devouring the origin essence of origin worlds, Yuan thought to himself. At the highest level of the I-Speak faction are 12 immortal beings, who occasionally enjoyed sampling the origin essence of origin worlds. Beyond these 12, the I-Speak faction also includes several Hunyuan ancestors who had joined their faction. These Hunyuan ancestors had not yet achieved immortal status and are even more voracious in consuming origin worlds' origin essences. The innate Hunyuan lifeform faction is our greatest enemy, but our conflicts with the I-Speak faction are no less severe. Yuan understood this well. As beings born from origin worlds, they shared an irreconcilable conflict with any lifeforms that sought to devour the origin essences of these worlds. Only by being strong enough ourselves can we deter all factions from preying upon origin worlds. Yuan reflected. Now, the eighth lord, Luo Feng, has emerged, a lord who broke through with sheer force. In the future, a ninth lord will rise. Our practitioners' faction will only grow stronger and stronger. Suppressing his fury, Yuan followed the induction and headed straight for one of the Hunyuan ancestor-level beings in this occupied territory. Whoosh! Wherever Yuan passed, the laws of the universe obeyed his will. With each step, he traversed immeasurable distances, arriving at his destination in mere moments. Brother Yuan, you've come. A warm voice greeted him as a towering black figure stepped forward in welcome. Yuan observed the other party. This massive black figure was clad in dark scales, with a single eye burning with blood-red flames, giving him a fearsome appearance. Yet his smile was disarmingly bright. Wugu Hunyuan Ancestor, Yuan looked at him. Wugu Hunyuan Ancestor is one of the 12 immortal beings of the I-Speak faction, ranking among the top 5 in strength. Even in the vast infinite Hunyuan space, Wugu Hunyuan Ancestor's power placed him within the top 30, comparable to the Lotus Prison Lianyu Mountain Lord. I've come to discuss your occupation of over 100 world clusters, Yuan said coldly. Our practitioners, faction and your I-Speak faction are supposed to be allies. Yet you invade our territory. Is this what you do to your allies? No need for haste, Wugu Hunyuan Ancestor said soothingly. Knowing you are coming, Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor has summoned the highest echelons, highest level, of our faction. Soon, Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor and the others will come in person in a while. Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor is the supreme leader of the I-Speak faction and the one who had established this alliance. Inside a grand, towering palace, Wugu Hunyuan Ancestor kept Yuan company as they waited. Only moments later, 11 figures descended, the clones of the other 11 immortal beings of the I-Speak faction. Their full gathering demonstrated just how seriously they regarded the practitioners' faction. Brother Yuan. A booming voice echoed a towering figure resembling a glacier, his body composed entirely of deep blue ice. Even in clone form, the terrifying depth of his power was palpable. Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor is an existence on par with Yuan in strength. He possesses an immortal body akin to Lord Wulan's, wielder of boundless ice power, and is even more formidable in combat than Lord Wulan. Bingfeng, Yuan nodded. Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor had lived far longer than Yuan. Once, they had been close friends who had faced life and death together back when Yuan was the sole lord of the practitioners' faction. At that time, Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor established the I-Speak faction and eagerly invited Yuan to join. Although Yuan declined, their friendship remained intact. But as the practitioners' faction grew stronger, the dynamics between them had shifted. Brother Yuan. Yuan. The 12 immortal beings of the I-Speak faction were all familiar with Yuan. Yuan exchanged greetings with each before his gaze settled on a gray-robed woman. Sister Shazhou, he said, his eyes tinged with complexity, it's been a long time. The gray-robed woman looked at him and gave a slight nod. In an era long past, the strongest existence acknowledged across the infinite Hunyuan space was none other than Shazhou. She was a solitary figure, aloof and reclusive, with only a handful of friends. Her closest friend is Bingfeng Hunyuan Ancestor. The second closest could arguably be Yuan. When the I Speak faction was first established, Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor extended a warm invitation, and Shazhou joined, instantly elevating the faction's prestige to terrifying heights. But later, the Lord Xingmeng emerged. A lord who had mastered 2 Hunyuan level Daos, Lord Xingmeng is regarded by many factions as the current strongest existence. Others still believed Shazhou held that title. However, one thing is certain: if the infinite Hunyuan space were to name its top 2, they would undoubtedly be the Lord Xingmeng and Shazhou. During clashes between the two factions, the Lord Xingmeng and the Infinite Serpent Hunyuan ancestors' spatial abilities countered each other, forcing both to fight at partial strength. The Infinite Serpent Hunyuan ancestor excelled in spatial power, further amplified by the Infinite World's support. His mastery over the void far surpassed even the Hunyuan ancestor of time and space. In a one-on-one battle, he is no weaker than Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor or Wugu Hunyuan ancestor and others. Yet, he is completely suppressed by the Lord Xingmeng. Sister Shazhou, our practitioners, faction and the I Speak faction have always been allies. Yet during our war with the innate Hunyuan lifeform faction, the I Speak faction seized over 100 of our world clusters. How do you think this should be resolved? Yuan asked Shazhou directly. Such trivial matters should be discussed with Bingfeng, Shazhou replied, clearly indifferent to the dispute over 100 world clusters. Brother Yuan. Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor grasped Yuan's hand and pulled him down to sit. You know Sister Shazhou's temperament, she doesn't involve herself in these affairs. While our I Speak faction and your practitioners, faction are indeed allies, you must understand that our faction is loosely organized. Even I struggle to fully restrain them. The moment I learnt of their occupation of those world clusters, I immediately ordered them to stop. But forcing them to return what they've taken. That's beyond my power. Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor looked at Yuan. Yuan also knew that the I Speak faction is a fragmented alliance. The 12 immortal beings each pursued their own interests. Perhaps only Shazhou remained detached from such resource disputes, her sole concern being her deep friendship with Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor. Yuan understood the bond between Shazhou and Bingfeng well. For Bingfeng, Shazhou would spare no efforts. 3,600 world clusters, we cannot lose a single one of our practitioners' territory. Yuan's gaze swept across the gathered figures. As you all know, we have already reclaimed all other occupied territories. Only these 100+ world clusters under your occupation are remaining. If necessary, the lords of our practitioners' faction will deploy the space-time network to hunt down every enemy within our borders. You dare? 3 figures with nearly identical appearances stood up together, their eyes burning with fury as they glared at Yuan. You dare to confront us? Your practitioners' faction expanded aggressively to claim such vast territory. What does it matter if we take a mere 100 clusters? The 3 figures lashed out one after another. Since joining the I Speak faction, they had been the most relentless in conquest. Nearly half of the occupied world clusters belonged to them. Among the other immortal beings, some joined in the angry rebukes, while others remained silent observers. The 3 bandits of wind, thunder, and sea. Yuan sneered at the 3 identical figures. If not for the backing of the I Speak faction, would you 3 vermin even dare to encroach upon our lands? What worth do you hold before the power of the practitioners' faction? The 3 sovereigns of wind, thunder, and sea are weak compared to Hunyuan ancestor standards, barely mid to low tier. Yet, due to their mastery of supreme laws, each is immortal. Relying on their immortality and the I Speak faction's influence, they are the most troublesome troublemakers. In the eternal land, they ranked at the very bottom, which is precisely why they stuck together. Yuan. The 3 sovereigns seethed at being openly called bandits. Don't forget Mo Man once annihilated all 3 of you single-handedly, Yuan mocked. He truly held no respect for these pests. Weak as they are, they never stopped causing trouble. Lord Moman had once struck them down in rage, obliterating their bodies and seizing their treasures. Yet, no matter how many times they were destroyed, they always regenerated. HMPH. The 3 sovereigns fumed but knew the truth: Lord Moman was their natural counter, and even Lord Xingmeng and Lord Jin possessed the power to obliterate them. Yuan, it's just 100 world clusters. Must we let this ruin our alliance? Wugu Hunyuan ancestor interjected with a forced smile. It is you who are straining the alliance. My stance is clear: you must return them all. Yuan declared, his voice unwavering. The 12 immortal beings of the I Speak faction exchanged glances, their thoughts divided. Among them, aside from weaklings like the 3 bandits, there are also those of terrifying strength. Very well. Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor finally spoke. Yuan, we are allies. Our greatest enemy is the innate Hunyuan lifeform faction. The I Speak faction and the innate Hunyuan lifeform faction competed for nearly identical resources. You know how loosely our faction operates. Many matters are beyond my control, Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor sighed. Let us compromise. The I Speak faction will return more than half of the occupied world clusters, keeping only 60. That should appease our internal factions. The immortal beings watched Yuan closely. After hearing this, Yuan stood up. We can't lose even a single world cluster of our practitioners, faction, he stated coldly, his eyes locking onto the 12. If you insist on holding them, then the practitioners, faction will formally declare war. The expressions of the immortal beings darkened. War. Brother Yuan, you have to think carefully, Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor warned. Do not call me, brother. Yuan's voice was icy. Those who invade our practitioners' territory are not qualified to be kinship. Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor's face hardened. Yuan, I have already conceded. If your practitioners' faction seeks war, do you truly believe we immortal beings will be afraid? Very well. Yuan nodded faintly, but I must warn you, once war begins, the battlefield will not be limited to these occupied territories. Every territory of the I Speak faction will become our target. If you dare invade, be prepared to be invaded in turn. What? Some of the immortal beings paled. Counter-invasion. The I Speak faction fears no escalation. Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor scoffed. To these immortal beings, the deaths of lower-tier members meant little. Then just wait for our response. With a final glance, Yuan took a single step and vanished. Silence engulfed the grand hall. The 12 immortal beings stood divided. Is war truly coming? Bingfeng Hunyuan ancestor's eyes burned with suppressed fury as he scanned the room. This is the consequence of your greed. He growled. You insisted on holding those 60 critical world clusters. And now, the 8 lords of the practitioners' faction are ready for war with us. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to MTL World at Mittel World 1 YouTube channel.